Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, a shape moves through the water that should not exist. It is longer than a passenger jet, heavier than 24 elephants, and for hundreds of meters in every direction, the ocean around it is strangely empty. No schools of fish gather beside it. No dolphins ride its wake. No sharks follow behind. The water simply clears. This is the blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived on Earth. Not the largest alive today, the largest ever, larger than any dinosaur, larger than any marine reptile, larger than every animal in the fossil record. And the closer scientists have looked at it, the stranger it has become. During deep dives, its heart can slow to just 2 beats per minute. When it opens its mouth to feed, it takes in more water than its own body weighs. Its calls can travel hundreds of miles through the ocean, yet the loudest animal on Earth sings at frequencies humans cannot hear. For decades, those songs have been changing. Year after year, the pitch grows lower. Every known population. No one knows exactly why. Then there is the mystery that keeps appearing wherever blue whales are studied. The space around them. Again and again, researchers notice the same thing. The largest creature in the history of life moves through the ocean almost alone. And that raises a question. What is it about this animal that seems to make the rest of the ocean keep its distance? If you're tucked in right now, phone dimmed, trying to let your brain slow down, this one was made for you. Give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, it's free, and it helps our channel more than you can imagine. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Let's begin. Somewhere along the edge of a freshwater lake, in a world that would be almost unrecognizable today, a small predator moved through the reeds. The land that would one day become Pakistan lay beneath a warmer sky. River channels wandered across broad floodplains. Fish stirred in the shallows. Along the shoreline, an animal about the size of a large dog searched for food. Its name was Pakicetus. Nothing about it suggested the future. It stood on 4 legs. Its feet ended in small hooves. Its body was built for running across solid ground, not drifting through open water. If a traveler could have watched it trotting beside those ancient lakes, there would have been no obvious sign that its descendants would someday cross entire oceans. Yet hidden within its skull was a clue. When paleontologists examined the fossils millions of years later, they found a distinctive structure in the inner ear. It was a tiny anatomical feature, easy to overlook beside teeth and bones and limbs. But that ear carried a signature found only in cetaceans, the group that includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. The connection was astonishing. The largest animal that would ever live on Earth could trace its ancestry back to a creature that once ran along muddy shorelines. The transformation did not happen all at once. Evolution rarely moves that way. It unfolded through countless generations, each one nudged slightly by the opportunities waiting at the water's edge. Pakicetus spent time near lakes and rivers, and its descendants spent even more. Soon came Ambulocetus, whose name means walking whale. It was a very different creature, longer, heavier, and far more comfortable in water. It hunted in a manner that has often been compared to a crocodile. It could still move on land, but the balance was shifting. Muscles, limbs, and instincts were beginning to adapt to a world where food could be found beneath the surface. Millions of years passed. Rivers led to estuaries. Estuaries opened into seas. Then appeared forms such as Dorodon. By this stage, the transformation was unmistakable. The hind legs had dwindled into tiny remnants. The forelimbs had become flippers. The body stretched into a streamlined shape, built for movement through water rather than across soil. Dorodon lived fully at sea and even gave birth there, completing a transition that had begun beside freshwater lakes. From the first known shoreline ancestors to these fully aquatic whales, only about 10 million years had passed. In evolutionary terms, it was remarkably swift. A lineage that once sprinted over land had reinvented nearly every aspect of its existence. Even then, the giants had not yet arrived. For tens of millions of years, whales remained far smaller than the blue whale known today. The crucial innovation came later with the evolution of baleen, the comb-like filtering structures that allowed whales to strain enormous quantities of prey from seawater. Filter feeding opened a new ecological path, but the true explosion in size waited for a change in the planet itself. The ice ages reshaped the oceans. Advancing glaciers ground mountains into fine sediment and delivered nutrients into coastal waters. Ocean circulation intensified. Upwelling currents carried those nutrients toward the surface. Across polar and temperate seas, krill populations gathered into immense seasonal concentrations. Suddenly, the ocean contained vast clouds of food. For the ancestors of modern rorqual whales, this abundance transformed size into an advantage. A larger mouth could engulf more prey. A larger body could travel farther between feeding grounds. Each increase in scale brought another reward, and natural selection continued to favor those gains, generation after generation. What began as a small carnivore pacing the margins of an ancient lake entered a cycle that never truly stopped. Bodies grew larger, feeding became more efficient, distances became easier to cross, and over a span of only a few million years, a lineage that had once fit comfortably on a shoreline expanded into something so immense that the history of life has never produced its equal. There is a moment when scale begins to slip beyond intuition. Measurements still exist, comparisons can still be made, yet the mind starts losing its grip on what those numbers represent. The blue whale lives in that territory where ordinary reference points become too small to be useful. An adult female may stretch beyond 100 feet from the tip of her rostrum to the end of her tail. The longest reliably recorded individual reached approximately 110 feet, measured at a whaling station in South Georgia during the early years of the 20th century. Even among blue whales, she stood at the outer edge of possibility, a body so long that it seemed less like a single organism and more like a moving landscape. Mass follows the same pattern. The heaviest blue whale ever documented weighed more than 418,000 pounds, taken in the Southern Ocean during the middle of the 20th century. Such weight approaches that of monuments rather than animals. Yet every pound belonged to living tissue, nourished by blood, guided by nerves, and sustained by a metabolism that somehow remained in balance. At the center of that immense body rests a heart weighing several hundred pounds. In exceptional individuals, it may approach nearly a metric ton. Its dimensions are often compared to a small vehicle, though even that comparison struggles to capture the reality of a living organ contracting within the darkness of a chest cavity larger than many rooms. With each beat, roughly 60 gallons of blood surge outward. The pulse travels through an aorta measuring about 9 inches across, a vessel so large that stories have long exaggerated its size. Popular accounts sometimes imagine a human swimming through it, though anatomy refuses such fantasies. The truth remains remarkable enough. The artery is wide enough to suggest that ordinary biological rules are being stretched to their practical limits. Far from the chest, that circulation reaches every corner of the whale's body. Altogether, approximately 14,000 pounds of blood move through this living architecture, carrying oxygen and nutrients across distances that would seem extraordinary inside any other animal. The heartbeat itself can sometimes be detected from miles away beneath the water, a slow rhythm echoing through the surrounding sea. The tongue alone weighs around 2.5 tons, roughly comparable to an adult elephant. It rests within a mouth capable of holding up to 90 tons of water and food during feeding. Even at rest, the dimensions challenge comprehension. Structures that serve simple biological functions in other creatures become colossal engineering projects inside a blue whale, and yet not every part follows the logic of relentless enlargement. The brain, for all the body's vastness, weighs only around 5 kilograms. A sperm whale possesses a larger brain despite inhabiting a smaller body. The contrast reveals something intriguing about the blue whale's design. Its existence is not built around elaborate social networks or constant problem solving. Instead, much of its life unfolds through memory, navigation, and communication carried across immense distances. The brain does not dominate the body, it guides it quietly through an ocean measured not in landmarks, but in currents, seasons, and sound. Toward the rear of the animal, the scale returns once more. The tail fluke can span approximately 25 feet from tip to tip. Suspended in the water, it resembles a broad horizontal wing. Each movement transfers enormous force into the sea, driving hundreds of thousands of pounds forward with measured efficiency. Seen piece by piece, the blue whale appears almost impossible, a collection of organs enlarged beyond familiar proportions. Yet none of those parts exist independently. The heart, blood, tongue, brain, arteries, and tail belong to a single living whole. What emerges is not merely a large animal, but an entire biological city carried within one continuous body, drifting through the ocean with a calmness that disguises the staggering scale hidden beneath its skin. From a distance, the feeding whale appears almost unhurried. It moves through cold water with a steadiness that seems effortless, as though its enormous size allows it to drift above the ordinary demands of motion. Yet beneath that calm surface lies one of the most physically extreme feeding strategies ever evolved. The target is not a fish, nor a squid, nor any prey large enough to be seen individually from afar. Instead, the whale searches for dense clouds of krill suspended within the water column. These swarms can gather in astonishing concentrations, transforming entire stretches of ocean into living reservoirs of energy. When the whale encounters one of these patches, everything changes. The first phase begins with acceleration. Power flows through the tail and fluke in slow, deliberate strokes. Despite its immense mass, the whale gathers speed, pushing forward at roughly 4 meters per second. For several seconds, it drives directly toward the densest part of the swarm, carrying momentum accumulated through the coordinated effort of muscles extending the length of its body. The ocean presses against its skin. Water slips past in smooth currents. Every movement is preparing for a single explosive event. Then comes engulfment. At the crucial moment, the mouth opens to nearly a right angle. The lower jaw swings outward in a way that would seem impossible in most mammals. Along the underside of the body, from the chin toward the navel, the ventral groove blubber begins to unfold. These long pleats remain compressed during ordinary swimming, but now they expand dramatically, stretching outward like an immense biological fabric designed for only this purpose. Within a matter of seconds, the whale engulfs a volume of water and prey exceeding its own body mass. A large blue whale, weighing around 200,000 pounds, may take in as much as 280,000 pounds of water during a single lunge. The mouth cavity expands into a temporary reservoir, transforming the front portion of the whale into something closer to a living net than a conventional predator. Inside that expanding chamber, another remarkable transformation occurs. The tongue, already enormous in its resting state, inverts and folds outward. Rather than remaining a solid structure within the mouth, it becomes part of the container itself, helping create the vast sac required to hold the incoming water. For a brief moment, one of the heaviest tongues on Earth effectively turns inside out. The physical forces involved are extraordinary. The instant the mouth opens, drag increases dramatically. Momentum collides with resistance. A body that had been moving at speed suddenly encounters a wall of water. The whale decelerates from active pursuit to near stillness within seconds. Mechanical stress ripples through muscles, connective tissues, and bones as the engulfed mass surges into the expanded cavity. Studies of fin whales, close relatives of blue whales, have revealed just how immense these forces can be. During a feeding lunge, the buccal cavity may fill at a rate approaching 20 cubic meters every second, accumulating roughly 60 tons of engulfed material in a single event. Blue whales operate on an even greater scale. Once the engulfment is complete, the final phase begins. The mouth closes. The whale no longer gathers water. Instead, it begins separating food from ocean. The tongue presses forward with immense force, squeezing the captured water toward hundreds of baleen plates hanging from the upper jaw. These structures, composed of keratin, form a dense filtering curtain. Water streams outward between them and returns to the sea. The krill remain trapped behind. This process unfolds slowly compared to the violence that preceded it. For half a minute, sometimes longer, the whale compresses, filters, and concentrates its meal. Only when the water has been expelled does it swallow the dense accumulation of prey. Then the cycle begins again. During the height of the feeding season, a blue whale may repeat this sequence hundreds of times in a single day, each lunge demanding tremendous effort, each engulfment pushing the architecture of the body toward its limits, and each successful filtration turning an ocean cloud of tiny crustaceans into the fuel that sustains the largest animal Earth has ever known. For most animals, the heart is hidden work. It beats faithfully in the background, unnoticed except during moments of exertion or fear. Scientists have studied hearts for centuries, measuring rhythms, pressures, and electrical signals across countless species. Yet for much of human history, the heart of the blue whale remained beyond reach, too large, too elusive, and too deeply tied to a life spent beneath the sea. Well, that changed when researchers in Monterey Bay managed something long considered nearly impossible. Using a specialized suction cup sensor attached directly to a free-swimming blue whale, they recorded the electrical activity of its heart in the open ocean. For the first time, the rhythm that powered the largest animal in Earth's history could be measured directly. What emerged from the recordings was unlike anything seen in other mammals. As the whale descended into the depths on a foraging dive, its heartbeat slowed dramatically. Minute after minute, as darkness thickened and pressure increased, the rhythm settled into an extraordinary calm. The average rate dropped to between 4 and 8 beats per minute. At its lowest point, the heart contracted only twice in an entire minute. Between those beats stretched long intervals of silence. In a smaller animal, such pauses would quickly become dangerous. Organs depend on a steady supply of oxygen. The brain requires continuous circulation, yet the blue whale moves through these extended gaps without interruption, continuing its dive while conserving precious energy beneath the surface. When the whale eventually returned upward, the rhythm changed. The body shifted from conservation to recovery. Oxygen stores depleted during the dive had to be replenished. Carbon dioxide had to be expelled. The enormous machinery of the animal accelerated into action. The heart rate surged. Near the surface, researchers recorded rates between 25 and 37 beats per minute. For many mammals, such numbers would still seem remarkably slow. For a blue whale, however, they appear to represent something far more significant. According to the study, the heart was already approaching the fastest pace it could physically sustain. Even within a feeding dive, the pattern revealed subtle adjustments. During active upward movement and powerful swimming phases, the heart accelerated. During gliding intervals, when momentum carried the whale forward and water was filtered from the engulfed mouth cavity, the rhythm gradually eased again. The heart responded continuously to the changing demands of movement, balancing energy conservation with metabolic necessity. What fascinated researchers most was not simply how slowly the heart could beat, but how little room remained at the upper end of its range. The blue whale's heart appears to operate very close to its physiological ceiling whenever the animal recovers at the surface. There is almost no reserve left. The organ cannot simply beat twice as fast if the whale grows larger. It is already working near the limits imposed by biology. That realization carries profound implications. For generations, people have wondered why evolution never produced an animal substantially larger than the blue whale. The answer may not lie in bones, muscles, or food supply alone. It may reside within the constraints of circulation. Every increase in body size demands more oxygen delivery, more nutrient transport, and greater blood flow across larger distances. Eventually, a threshold is reached where the heart can no longer scale upward. The blue whale may be standing precisely at that boundary. Part of what makes this possible is a remarkable adaptation hidden within the whale's circulatory system. The aortic arch, curving away from the heart, possesses exceptional elasticity. During each contraction, it stretches, storing energy within its walls. Between beats, it slowly recoils, continuing to push blood forward, even while the heart itself remains momentarily still. The effect resembles a gentle release of stored momentum, smoothing circulation through the long pauses that occur during deep dives. Blood continues its journey, oxygen continues its delivery, life continues between beats. As researcher Jeremy Goldbogen observed, animals operating at physiological extremes reveal the boundaries of what living systems can achieve. Within the chest of the blue whale, those boundaries pulse slowly through the ocean, marking what may be one of the outer limits of size itself. If a blue whale were reduced to a simple silhouette, stripped of all detail, and placed beside the creatures it consumes, the contrast would seem almost absurd. One is the largest animal ever produced by life on Earth. The other is a small crustacean, delicate enough to disappear on the tip of a finger. Yet this imbalance sits at the center of the whale's existence. Across the productive months of the feeding season, a blue whale may consume as much as 16 tons of krill in a single day. That translates into roughly 40 million individual animals passing through its feeding apparatus between sunrise and sunset. Entire swarms vanish into a mouth large enough to engulf volumes of water that rival small buildings. And still, despite the immensity of the body surrounding it, the throat remains surprisingly narrow. The esophagus of a blue whale measures only a few inches across, roughly between 6 and 10 inches in diameter. Popular stories have often imagined whales swallowing sailors, boats, or other large objects, but the anatomy tells a different story. A blue whale could not swallow a human. It could not swallow most fish. Its throat simply does not allow it. The contradiction is striking. The largest creature ever known survives on prey that is typically only an inch or two long, while possessing a swallowing passage that excludes anything much larger. This apparent limitation is not a flaw. It is the result of an evolutionary path shaped with extraordinary precision. Everything about the blue whale points toward krill. The baleen hanging from the upper jaw exists for krill. The expandable grooves running along the underside exist for krill. The immense mouth cavity, the seasonal migrations, the feeding behavior, even the body's enormous size can be traced back to the distribution of these tiny crustaceans. In the Antarctic, the species most closely associated with blue whales is Euphausia superba, a small shrimp-like animal that drifts through some of the richest waters on the planet. Individually, each krill contains very little energy. Collected into vast swarms, however, they become one of the greatest food resources available in the ocean. The whale's challenge is not catching individual prey. It is locating concentrations dense enough to justify the effort required to feed. A lunge demands tremendous energy. Muscles accelerate an immense body. Tissues stretch. Water resistance rises dramatically. If the swarm ahead is too sparse, the whale spends more energy than it gains. Research suggests that profitable feeding generally requires krill densities exceeding roughly 100 individuals per cubic meter of water. Below that threshold, the balance begins to shift in the wrong direction. As a result, the whale's life revolves around periods of abundance that arrive only briefly each year. During the productive summer months in polar seas, blue whales feed with relentless intensity. They accumulate reserves at a remarkable pace, drawing energy from countless millions of krill. In as little as 90 to 120 days, a whale may acquire more than 80% of the calories it will require for an entire year. The abundance is temporary. The reward must last long after the feast ends. When the feeding season fades, the whale begins moving away from these rich waters. For months at a time, food intake declines dramatically. Much of the energy needed for migration, reproduction, and survival comes not from active feeding, but from reserves stored within the body itself. This strategy has served blue whales extraordinarily well. It allowed a lineage, once tied to modest proportions, to grow into giants. It transformed tiny crustaceans into the foundation of the largest animal that has ever lived. Yet hidden within that success is a delicate dependence. The whale does not possess a broad menu. It cannot easily shift to another way of life. Its anatomy, behavior, and yearly rhythm all converge upon a single resource. The giant's throat, narrow and specialized, reveals the truth. Beneath all that scale lies a creature whose fate remains closely bound to some of the smallest animals in the sea. Far below the surface, there comes a depth where the ocean begins to erase itself. Colors disappear first, then distance becomes difficult to judge. Eventually, even direction feels abstract, replaced by a vast darkness where water extends outward without visible boundaries. This is where the blue whale often searches for food. The challenge is greater than it might first appear. Krill are not scattered evenly across the sea. They gather into dense swarms that drift, stretch, compress, and dissolve according to currents, temperature layers, and the slow movements of the water itself. Some aggregations extend for extraordinary distances, forming living concentrations that shift from hour to hour and season to season. Finding them is essential. A whale may descend hundreds of meters beneath the surface, entering regions where sunlight no longer provides useful information. At these depths, the pressure of the surrounding ocean increases dramatically. The water grows colder. Visibility approaches nothing. Yet somewhere within that darkness lie the concentrated patches of prey needed to sustain a body of immense scale. Unlike sperm whales and dolphins, blue whales do not possess echolocation. They do not project rapid clicks and construct detailed acoustic maps of their surroundings. The sensory strategy that guides them through the deep remains only partly understood, leaving researchers with a collection of clues rather than a complete explanation. One possibility lies in memory. Blue whales often return to productive feeding grounds year after year, tracing routes across vast stretches of ocean with remarkable consistency. Certain regions repeatedly produce dense concentrations of krill, and whales appear capable of remembering these locations across many seasons. The ocean may seem fluid and ever-changing, but beneath its surface are recurring patterns, and the whales seem able to recognize them. Memory alone, however, cannot explain every successful hunt. Even familiar feeding grounds shift from day to day. Swarms rise and sink through the water column. Ocean conditions change. Productive areas one week may become nearly empty the next. A whale descending into darkness still needs information about what exists beneath it in that particular moment. Some researchers have suggested that bioluminescence may contribute. Many marine organisms produce faint flashes or glows through chemical reactions occurring within their bodies. Dense concentrations of krill can generate subtle luminous effects, creating patterns that might provide clues in otherwise lightless water. Whether blue whales actively use such signals remains uncertain, but the possibility lingers. Other scientists have explored the idea that whales may sense environmental conditions linked to krill abundance. Variations in temperature, salinity, or chemical composition can reveal where nutrient-rich waters are gathering. Invisible gradients drift through the sea, carrying information that a highly adapted marine mammal may be able to interpret. There is also a more speculative possibility. The whale's own low frequency causes travel enormous distances through water. Some researchers have wondered whether these sounds might provide crude environmental feedback, not true echolocation in the dolphin sense, but enough information to reveal large-scale features within the surrounding ocean. The evidence remains incomplete, yet the idea reflects how little is still known about the sensory world of these giants. What is known is that blue whales have been recorded feeding at depths exceeding 500 meters. At such depths, darkness is nearly absolute. The whale descends carrying only the information it has gathered from memory, experience, environmental cues, and whatever subtle signals its senses can detect. Every feeding dive, therefore, contains an element of uncertainty. The whale commits energy long before success is guaranteed. It accelerates toward a target that cannot be inspected closely in advance. If the concentration proves insufficient, the effort yields little reward. A poorly chosen lunge consumes valuable resources while providing almost nothing in return. During a single foraging dive, lasting roughly 10 to 17 minutes, the whale may perform several such lunges. Each one demands substantial effort. Each one depends upon information gathered in a world where direct observation is often impossible. And so, the largest animal on Earth spends much of its feeding life navigating a landscape made not of visible landmarks, but of probabilities, memories, shifting currents, and faint traces hidden within the dark water, moving through an environment that reveals only fragments of itself at a time. Long before a blue whale comes into view, long before a plume rises above the surface or a shadow passes beneath the water, its presence may already be moving across the ocean as sound. Not a sharp sound, not a sudden one. Instead, it arrives as a slow pulse, a deep vibration spreading through the sea with patient persistence. If a human were somehow placed nearby, much of it would pass unnoticed. The loudest animal on Earth speaks in a register that lies partly beyond our natural hearing. This strange contradiction begins with frequency. The calls of blue whales typically occupy a range between roughly 10 and 40 hertz. Human hearing generally begins around 20 hertz, meaning a significant portion of the whale's vocal world exists below the threshold of ordinary perception. Instruments can detect it easily, but human ears often cannot. The result is a remarkable reality. The most powerful sustained sound produced by any living creature unfolds largely in silence from our perspective. Yet the sound itself is immense. At full intensity, a blue whale call may reach approximately 188 decibels. In terms of raw acoustic power, this exceeds the noise generated by a jet engine during takeoff and dwarfs many of the loudest sounds humans encounter in daily life. Such comparisons, however, can be misleading because underwater acoustics follow different rules than those of air. What matters most is not merely volume, but how effectively the sound moves through its environment. Water is an extraordinary conductor of sound. Acoustic waves travel through it more than 4 times faster than they travel through air. Low frequencies are especially effective. They lose energy slowly and can continue across immense distances with remarkable efficiency. A call released by a blue whale may travel hundreds of miles through suitable conditions. Some studies and theoretical models developed during the 20th century suggested that under ideal circumstances, the strongest calls could potentially propagate across entire ocean basins. The whale's voice is therefore less like a shout and more like a moving current, flowing through water that carries information far beyond the horizon. The sounds themselves are not random. Recordings reveal structured patterns, sequences of rumbles, pulses, groans, and prolonged notes that repeat with remarkable consistency. Individual vocalizations may last between 10 and 30 seconds. In some regions, more elaborate arrangements emerge. Off the coast of Sri Lanka, researchers have documented blue whales producing sequences of 4 notes that combine into songs lasting around 2 minutes. These vocal traditions vary between populations, creating acoustic signatures that drift through different parts of the world ocean. The mechanism behind these sounds remains partly mysterious. Unlike humans, blue whales possess no vocal cords. Their voices emerge through an entirely different system. Scientists believe air is moved through specialized structures associated with the larynx and nasal passages near the blowhole. As that air circulates through internal chambers, vibrations are generated and amplified into the low-frequency sounds that define blue whale communication. What makes this process particularly elegant is that the whale can recycle the same air repeatedly. Unlike a human speaking into the atmosphere, it does not need to exhale precious air reserves into the ocean. The sound is produced within the body while conserving resources needed for diving. As for the purpose of these calls, several possibilities coexist. The ocean inhabited by blue whales is vast beyond ordinary scale. Individuals are often separated by immense distances. A communication system capable of spanning hundreds of miles provides an obvious advantage when locating potential mates or maintaining awareness of distant companions. The calls may also help whales remain connected to a world that is otherwise sparse and dispersed. Some researchers have suggested an additional role. The low-frequency sounds may interact with the surrounding environment in ways that provide information about underwater landscapes and conditions. Not true echolocation, but perhaps a subtler form of environmental awareness woven into the act of communication itself. Whatever their precise function, these calls transform solitude into connection. Across immense stretches of open ocean, where encounters may be rare and distances difficult to comprehend, the voice of the blue whale continues traveling outward, carried by the sea long after the animal that produced it has moved on. Some mysteries announce themselves with dramatic discoveries. Others arrive quietly, hidden inside long rows of data collected year after year. The mystery of the blue whale's changing song belongs to the second kind. It began with listening. As underwater recording technology improved during the second half of the 20th century, scientists gradually accumulated archives of blue whale vocalizations from oceans around the world. At first, the recordings seemed valuable simply because they existed at all. They preserved voices that had previously vanished into the sea without a trace. Over time, however, those archives became something more. They became a record stretching across decades, and within that record, a pattern slowly emerged. The calls were changing, not abruptly, not in a way that would be obvious from one year to the next. The shift was subtle, almost patient, yet when recordings separated by decades were compared, the difference became impossible to ignore. The frequencies had drifted downward. The songs were becoming deeper. Researchers eventually documented the same trend across every major blue whale population studied. In some regions, the decline exceeded 30%. More remarkable still, the pattern appeared astonishingly consistent. Decade after decade, the pitch continued to fall. One of the scientists who became closely associated with the phenomenon was Mark McDonald, a researcher specializing in whale acoustics. As years passed, he noticed that equipment settings, which had once worked perfectly, no longer captured the calls as effectively. The detectors required continual adjustment toward lower frequencies. The change was not anecdotal. It was measurable. Working alongside colleagues including John Hildebrand and Sarah Melnick, McDonald examined extensive collections of recordings gathered across multiple oceans and spanning many years. The conclusion remained the same no matter where the data originated. Blue whale songs were descending in pitch worldwide. Finding the pattern proved easier than explaining it. One of the earliest ideas seemed reasonable at first glance. Following the end of large-scale commercial whaling, some blue whale populations began recovering. As numbers increased, individuals may have become less isolated from one another. Perhaps whales no longer needed to project their calls as aggressively across enormous distances. Deeper sounds, more difficult to produce, and potentially more impressive as biological signals, might have become advantageous. In this interpretation, the shift resembled a change in communication strategy. The whale traded reach for resonance, replacing some measure of volume with greater depth. Yet, the explanation encountered a serious problem. Recovery rates differed dramatically between regions. Some populations rebounded relatively well, others remained far below historical numbers. If population density drove the frequency change, researchers would expect different populations to change at different rates. Instead, the decline appeared surprisingly uniform. The songs continued moving downward along nearly parallel paths regardless of local conditions. The pattern refused to cooperate with the hypothesis. Other explanations followed. Researchers examined the possibility that increasing ocean noise might be altering whale communication. They considered climate change, shifts in ocean chemistry, changes in body size, and numerous other environmental factors. Each proposal offered pieces of potential insight, yet none accounted fully for the global consistency of the trend. Again and again, the evidence seemed to stop just short of a solution. This is what makes the mystery unusual. Scientific mysteries often shrink as data accumulates. Unknowns become narrower. Explanations become clearer. In this case, decades of additional recordings confirmed the reality of the phenomenon while leaving its cause unresolved. The songs continue to deepen. Somewhere in the ocean, a blue whale produces a call that is slightly lower than the calls produced by its ancestors several decades ago. Another whale answers with a similarly shifted note. Across distant populations, separated by entire ocean basins, the same gradual descent unfolds. Scientists can measure it, they can graph it, they can trace it through thousands of recordings. Yet the reason remains elusive. Mark MacDonald once remarked that the mystery has been tormenting whale scientists because they still cannot figure it out. That sentiment captures the peculiar beauty of the problem. After decades of study, the evidence points clearly toward a change occurring across the entire species, while the mechanism behind that change remains hidden beneath the surface, carried through the ocean in songs that grow deeper with every passing generation. A recording arrives at a research station from somewhere far out at sea. There is no photograph attached, no satellite tag, no visual confirmation of the animal that produced it. Only a sequence of low sounds moving through the water, preserved as lines on a screen and patterns within a waveform. Yet from those sounds alone, scientists can often determine where the whale came from. This ability reveals something remarkable about blue whales. Their songs are not universal. Across the world's oceans, different populations have developed distinct vocal traditions. A whale from the North Pacific does not sing in exactly the same way as a whale from Antarctic waters. Populations in the Indian Ocean produce patterns that differ from both. The differences are subtle to human listeners, particularly when much of the sound exists near the edge of perception, but to researchers, they are clear enough to function almost like signatures. The ocean may appear continuous on a map, yet acoustically, it contains many regional voices. What makes these differences especially fascinating is that they are not believed to be encoded entirely in genetics. Blue whale songs are learned. A calf enters the world surrounded by sound. During the earliest stages of life, it travels beside its mother through an acoustic landscape already shaped by the whales around it. Over time, exposure to those recurring patterns influences the vocal traditions the young whale will later carry. In this way, songs pass from one generation to the next, not through DNA alone, but through experience. The process resembles cultural inheritance. As years pass, songs shift gradually. Small changes accumulate. Certain notes lengthen, rhythms evolve, frequencies drift. Entire populations participate in these slow transformations, creating traditions that remain recognizable while never standing completely still. Because of this, blue whale songs function as more than communication. They also serve as markers of identity. Researchers studying recordings can often identify the population of origin without ever seeing the whale itself. The song becomes a kind of acoustic passport, carrying information about geography, ancestry, and social history. A whale crossing the ocean does not leave footprints behind. Instead, it leaves traces of its origin within the structure of its voice. Most of these songs appear to be produced by males. This observation has led many scientists to conclude that mate attraction plays an important role in their purpose. Across the animal kingdom, elaborate vocal displays frequently emerge wherever individuals must locate one another across large distances, and few species face distances as immense as those separating blue whales. Yet the songs may serve additional functions as well. Some researchers have proposed that vocalizations help coordinate movements between widely dispersed individuals. Others have explored the possibility that songs provide information about environmental conditions, allowing whales to interact not only with one another, but also with the ocean itself. The exact balance among these functions remains uncertain, adding another layer of complexity to a communication system already rich with unanswered questions. Recent findings have made the picture even more intriguing. Researchers associated with Cornell University's bioacoustics work documented a long-term decline not only in frequency but also in intensity. Over recent decades, blue whale songs have become both deeper and quieter. Measurements suggest that the overall strength of these calls has declined by nearly 40%. This means the changes discussed earlier are unfolding along more than one dimension. The whales are lowering the pitch of their songs while also reducing the power behind them. Why this is happening remains unclear. The voices drifting across ocean basins today are therefore not identical to the voices recorded generations ago. They carry the same general structure, the same regional character, and the same cultural continuity, yet they have been subtly reshaped by time. Somewhere in the North Pacific, a male whale sings with the dialect of his population. Far away, another whale produces a different sequence shaped by a different history. Across thousands of miles of water, these regional traditions persist, evolving slowly from one generation to the next. The result is an ocean filled not with a single language, but with many related voices, each carrying its own accent, its own history, and its own place within the vast acoustic culture of the deep. In many parts of the animal kingdom, survival depends on company. Herds gather across grasslands. Schools move through open water. Pods coordinate their movements with remarkable precision. Even among whales, social bonds often shape daily life, linking individuals into stable groups that remain together for years. The blue whale followed a different path. A researcher tracking one across the ocean may spend days observing a single animal with no companions nearby. There are no permanent pods moving in formation, no intricate family clans spanning generations, no tightly organized societies comparable to those found among orcas, sperm whales, or dolphins. Most of the time, the blue whale travels through the world as an individual. Encounters certainly occur. The ocean is not empty of other blue whales. At feeding grounds or migration routes, two animals may converge. Occasionally, three travel within sight of one another. For a brief period, they share the same water, surfacing beneath the same sky and exchanging the low-frequency calls that drift through the sea. Yet these associations rarely last. Hours later, or perhaps days, the whales separate again, each resuming its own journey. The strongest relationship in a blue whale's life begins at birth. For roughly a year, a calf remains close to its mother. During this period, survival depends entirely upon that bond. The calf follows her movements, learns migration pathways, and grows through the rich milk she provides. Together, they cross immense distances, forming a partnership unlike any other stage of the whale's life. Then, gradually, the bond loosens. The young whale becomes independent. The long apprenticeship ends. From that point forward, much of its existence unfolds alone. Years become decades. The whale follows routes learned during its earliest months, moving between distant feeding and breeding regions. It may communicate with others through sound, sending calls across vast stretches of ocean. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another whale may hear and respond. Yet the two animals might remain separated by hundreds of miles, connected acoustically while physically inhabiting entirely different portions of the sea. This kind of existence can appear unusual when viewed through a human lens. Social species often gather because companionship offers advantages. Blue whales, however, live under a different set of constraints. The explanation seems to lie not in temperament but in ecology. Every blue whale carries immense energetic demands. Its body requires staggering quantities of food. Even in productive waters, dense krill concentrations represent finite resources. A feeding patch capable of sustaining one whale may become less profitable when additional giants arrive. The arithmetic is simple, though its consequences are profound. When two blue whales exploit the same concentration of prey, each reduces what remains for the other. A resource that appears abundant by ordinary standards becomes limited once measured against the needs of the largest animal on Earth. Scale transforms abundance into competition. Over evolutionary time, this reality may have shaped behavior as effectively as any social instinct. Individuals capable of spreading out across productive regions would gain access to more food. Distances between whales would naturally increase. Solitude would emerge, not as an emotional preference, but as a practical solution. In this light, the empty water surrounding a blue whale begins to look different. The space is not accidental. It is part of the animal's ecological design. The whale requires room, not because it defends territory in the conventional sense, but because its biological demands are so vast. The ocean around it functions almost like an extension of the body itself, a surrounding volume of resources necessary to sustain life at such extraordinary scale. And so the giant moves onward. Its voice may travel immense distances. Its routes may span entire ocean basins. It may cross paths with others from time to time, sharing brief moments before continuing on separate courses. Yet for most of its life, the blue whale remains what its size has made it, a traveler whose existence unfolds across spaces so large that companionship becomes fleeting, and whose solitude is written not into its personality, but into the mathematics of survival. Imagine placing a mountain in motion, not a mountain of stone, but one of flesh and blood, gliding through water with quiet determination. The ocean yields around it, currents bend, layers of water shift. Long before the animal itself arrives, its passage has already begun altering the surrounding sea. This is one of the least visible consequences of great size. Whenever a blue whale moves forward, it displaces an extraordinary amount of water. The body alone may exceed 100 feet in length and approach 200 tons in mass. Such dimensions transform ordinary swimming into something closer to a moving physical disturbance. Water cannot simply remain where it is. It must part, circulate, compress, and flow around the advancing animal. The result is a complex field of motion extending outward from the whale itself. Ahead of the body, bow waves form. Along its sides, pressure gradients emerge. Behind it, turbulence trails through the water in broad, slowly changing patterns. None of these effects are dramatic in the way a storm is dramatic. Most occur silently and continuously, woven into the hydrodynamics of movement. Yet, to the creatures sharing that space, they are impossible to ignore. Many marine animals perceive the world through more than sight and sound. Fish possess specialized sensory structures known as lateral lines, delicate systems running along the sides of their bodies. These organs detect subtle changes in water movement, allowing fish to sense nearby objects, approaching predators, and the motions of neighboring animals. Squid and various marine invertebrates possess different sensory mechanisms, yet many achieve a similar result. They read disturbances moving through the water around them. To such animals, a blue whale announces itself not visually, but physically. A pressure change arrives. Then another. Water begins behaving differently. Invisible signals spread outward through the surrounding environment, carrying information about the presence of something enormous. The response is usually simple. The animal moves away, not because it understands what a blue whale is, not because it experiences fear in any human sense. The reaction is far more fundamental. Evolution has shaped countless marine organisms to respond automatically to unusual water disturbances. When a massive displacement approaches, clearing the path is often the safest and most efficient option. As a result, the ocean begins reorganizing itself around the whale's movement. Small fish alter course, squid drift aside, dense concentrations of animals subtly shift position. No central decision occurs, no coordination is required. Thousands of individual responses combine into a larger pattern, creating the impression that the water is opening in advance of the whale's arrival. Even larger predators participate in this quiet avoidance. Tuna, swordfish, and many shark species gain little by approaching a blue whale. It is not suitable prey. It does not compete directly for their food. It occupies a biological category so different from their own that interaction offers few benefits. The whale moves through their environment as a presence rather than a participant. This distinction matters. Many animals dominate ecosystems through aggression. Others shape behavior through competition. The blue whale often does neither. Its influence emerges from scale itself. The animal occupies so much physical and ecological space that countless surrounding organisms simply adjust around it. This begins to illuminate part of the mystery that has lingered since the beginning of the story. The ocean does not clear around a blue whale because the whale actively forces it to. There is no pursuit, no display, no territorial warning. Most creatures never experience direct conflict with it at all. Instead, they encounter the consequences of immense size expressed through moving water. Pressure waves spread outward. Sensory systems detect them. Paths change. One animal alters course, then another, then hundreds more. The effect accumulates until the space surrounding the whale appears strangely open, as though the ocean itself has stepped aside. In that sense, the blue whale resembles certain forces of nature more than it resembles a conventional predator. Its passage reshapes the environment. Simply by occurring, the water responds because it must. And so the clearing around the whale is not really about behavior, it is about physics. The body of the whale is not merely passing through the ocean. The body itself is an event. For most of its existence, an adult blue whale moves through the ocean with remarkably little concern for predators. Its size alone removes it from the ordinary calculations that govern life in the sea. Few animals are large enough to challenge it. Fewer still possess any reason to try. Yet one species does. Not because it is larger, not because it is stronger, but because it hunts collectively, combining intelligence, experience, and cooperation into something capable of confronting prey far beyond the ability of any individual hunter. The orca. For many years, scientists suspected that encounters between orcas and blue whales must have occurred. Historical accounts hinted at such possibilities, and scattered observations suggested conflicts in distant waters. Direct evidence, however, remained surprisingly scarce. The largest animal on Earth seemed to exist largely beyond documented predation. Then came a series of observations that changed the picture. Off Bremer Bay, along the coast of Western Australia, researchers witnessed and recorded successful attacks on adult blue whales. The events were documented by John Totterdell and colleagues at the Cetacean Research Center. Across multiple hunts observed during the early decades of the 21st century, a consistent pattern emerged. The attacks were not chaotic. Groups of orcas worked together with extraordinary coordination. Pods numbering well over a dozen individuals surrounded the whale and maintained pressure over extended periods. Rather than relying on a single overwhelming strike, they employed persistence. The blue whale became the center of a moving siege. Orcas targeted vulnerable areas around the head and dorsal region. Individuals rotated through the attack, allowing others to recover before rejoining. Some animals positioned themselves strategically, while others delivered the most direct contact. The effort unfolded over long stretches of time, gradually exhausting a creature many times their combined size. Hour after hour, the balance shifted. The whale resisted. A blue whale does not surrender easily. Every movement of its body carries immense force. Even weakened, it remains one of the most formidable animals in the ocean simply through mass alone. Yet the challenge posed by the orcas was not one of raw strength. It was one of endurance and coordination. In the first fully documented attack, the blue whale measured roughly 70 feet in length. Initially, it fought back successfully, maintaining movement and resisting the pressure of the surrounding pod. Gradually, however, the accumulated effort of the attackers began to take effect. The whale tired, its responses slowed. Eventually, two orcas climbed partially onto its body, using their weight and positioning to help force it beneath the surface. The hunt ended only after prolonged exhaustion had taken its toll. What followed revealed another aspect of orca society. The carcass became a shared resource distributed among pod members of different ages. Older females, often serving as matriarchs within the group, appeared central to the hunt itself. They led movements, directed attacks, and contributed heavily to the coordinated behavior that made success possible. Among the preferred targets was the whale's tongue. Weighing several tons and rich in fat and energy, it represented one of the most valuable portions of the carcass. In multiple documented cases, orcas focused on extracting this tissue after the kill. What appears almost grotesque from a human perspective reflects a simple ecological reality. High-energy food is precious, and predators evolve to exploit it efficiently. The broader significance of these observations extends beyond the individual hunts. Marine mammal researcher Robert Pittman has suggested that such behavior may not be new at all. Orcas could have hunted blue whales for thousands of years. If so, the apparent rarity of these events during the modern era may have resulted from a different cause entirely. The collapse of blue whale populations during the whaling age dramatically reduced opportunities for such encounters. As blue whales became scarce, orcas likely shifted toward alternative prey. Hunting traditions may have faded in some regions or persisted only in specialized populations. As blue whales slowly recover in certain parts of the world, those ancient interactions may be reappearing. The result is a rare exception to a pattern that otherwise defines the blue whale's existence. Across the ocean, almost nothing approaches it, almost nothing attempts to challenge it. Yet among all the predators the sea has produced, one remains willing to try, not through size, but through cooperation, patience, and the collective power of a family hunting as one. There is one period in a blue whale's life when solitude becomes impossible. A calf remains close to its mother from the moment it enters the world. The young whale is already enormous by the standards of almost every other marine animal, yet beside its mother it appears small, vulnerable, and unfinished. For months, it depends upon her for nourishment, guidance, and protection as they move through waters that can contain dangers neither would face alone. During this stage, the behavior of the mother changes. The vast wanderer that normally crosses oceans in relative isolation becomes intensely focused on a single responsibility. Every movement of the calf matters. Every approach by a potential threat demands attention. The enormous body that usually exists only for itself becomes a shield. When orcas appear, observers have documented a remarkably consistent response. Rather than fleeing directly, The mother often places herself between the attackers and her calf. She turns her body into a barrier, positioning tons of muscle, bone, and blubber along the most likely path of attack. The calf remains tucked behind her, while the adults attempting to reach it must first confront the largest animal on Earth. The strategy is simple. Reach the calf only by passing through the mother. In the water, that is a formidable challenge. A blue whale's body is not merely large, it is built around the most powerful muscles ever assembled in a living creature. Along the rear of the animal, those muscles converge upon a tail fluke spanning roughly 25 feet from tip to tip. Each downward stroke propels a body weighing hundreds of thousands of pounds across immense distances. In a defensive encounter, that same structure becomes a weapon. A direct strike from the fluke can generate extraordinary force. Marine biologists studying interactions between whales and orcas have long recognized the danger such blows present. An orca struck squarely by a powerful tail movement risks severe injury. Bones can break, internal damage can occur. Even wounds that appear survivable may later compromise the predator's ability to hunt. For an orca, hunting ability is life itself. A broken jaw can make capturing prey impossible. Damaged ribs can interfere with movement and endurance. Injury carries consequences that extend far beyond the immediate encounter. Every attack, therefore, involves calculation, even among highly capable predators. This helps explain an important pattern. Despite the attention attracted by dramatic observations of whale predation, attacks on blue whale calves remain relatively uncommon. They occur primarily in particular regions and during specific seasons when vulnerable calves are present. Even then, successful outcomes for the predators are far from guaranteed. Many attempts fail. The reason lies partly in the difficulty of separating mother and calf. Orcas are intelligent and coordinated, but they must contend with an opponent whose physical dimensions fundamentally alter the encounter. The mother does not need to chase. She does not need to outmaneuver every attacker. Often she simply needs to remain between danger and her offspring while presenting the constant threat of overwhelming force. Researchers have sometimes compared defensive blue whale mothers to battleships. The comparison is imperfect yet useful. A battleship is not known for agility. It is known for mass, resilience, and the consequences of getting too close. The same principle applies here. The mother may move more slowly than the predators surrounding her, but every approach carries risk. This reality shapes predator behavior. Compared with calves of gray whales or humpback whales, blue whale calves experience relatively few documented attacks. The opportunities are narrower, the costs are higher, success is less certain. What emerges is a portrait of protection expressed through scale. For most of its life, the blue whale seems detached from conflict, moving through the ocean with little need for confrontation. Yet, during the brief years when a calf swims beside it, another side becomes visible. The giant that normally travels alone transforms into something else entirely, a living fortress whose immense body stands between the future of its lineage and the predators attempting to reach it. Not all orcas live the same life. To human eyes, they may appear nearly identical, black and white silhouettes moving through cold water with the same confidence and precision. Yet beneath that familiar appearance exists a remarkable diversity of traditions. Across the world's oceans, different populations have developed different ways of surviving, and those differences shape almost every aspect of their lives, including what they eat. Along the coasts of Iceland, some orca populations focus heavily on herring. Entire generations grow up pursuing schools of fish, learning specialized hunting techniques refined through decades of observation and practice. In the Pacific Northwest, resident populations are famous for their reliance on salmon. Far to the south, other groups concentrate on seals and marine mammals, developing strategies suited to completely different prey. These preferences are not simply individual choices. An orca calf enters a world already rich with inherited knowledge. It learns from its mother, from older relatives, and from the pod around it. Hunting techniques are demonstrated repeatedly. Successful prey choices become traditions. Over time, those traditions become culture. In many ways, an orca pod resembles a community carrying its own accumulated history. This means that what an orca eats is often determined long before it catches its first meal. A calf raised in a fish-eating population grows into a fish-eating adult. One raised among marine mammal hunters acquires an entirely different set of skills. Knowledge passes between generations, not through instinct alone, but through learning. Because of this, hunting blue whales is not something most orcas simply decide to do. The challenge is too specialized. A successful attack requires coordination among many individuals. It requires understanding how to isolate a target, how to maintain pressure over long periods, and how to manage the considerable risks involved. These behaviors must be learned, practiced, and preserved. Without that cultural foundation, the knowledge disappears. Even for pods that possess the necessary skills, another factor enters the equation: energy. Every predator lives within a balance between effort and reward. The ocean contains many opportunities to eat, but not all opportunities are equally profitable. Some prey can be captured quickly with minimal danger. Others demand extraordinary commitment. A blue whale falls firmly into the second category. A hunt may last for hours. Numerous orcas must participate. Coordination must remain precise throughout the encounter. At every stage, the possibility of injury remains present. The target may escape despite substantial effort, leaving the attackers with nothing to show for their investment. Compare this with a seal. A seal hunt is often measured in minutes rather than hours. The prey is smaller, easier to overpower, and far less capable of inflicting serious damage. The energetic return arrives quickly, while the dangers remain comparatively low. From an ecological perspective, the difference is profound. The ability to kill a blue whale does not automatically make doing so worthwhile. Predators survive by making efficient decisions, and efficiency frequently favors easier opportunities. Intelligence, after all, is not merely the capacity to attempt difficult tasks. It is also the capacity to recognize when those tasks are unnecessary. This is what makes the orcas observed near Bremer Bay so scientifically important. They appear to represent a population that has retained or perhaps redeveloped a rare hunting tradition. Within their community exists a body of knowledge, allowing them to pursue one of the most difficult prey species on Earth. That knowledge may have persisted across generations, surviving periods when blue whales became scarce and opportunities for such hunts diminished. Their existence demonstrates what orcas are capable of when culture, experience, and ecological opportunity align. Yet they remain exceptional rather than typical. Across the vast majority of the world's oceans, blue whales move through waters inhabited by orcas that never challenge them, not because those predators lack intelligence, not because they lack coordination, and not because the whale is invulnerable. The reason is simpler. The blue whale's size creates a calculation so unfavorable that most predators decide the reward is not worth the cost. Its immense body functions less like a barrier and more like a deterrent, a living equation that discourages attack before it begins. And so the ocean's most sophisticated hunter often arrives at the same conclusion as countless other creatures that share the sea. The easiest path is simply to pass by. Life begins at a scale that would already seem extraordinary for almost any other animal on Earth. When a blue whale calf enters the ocean for the first time, it is not a tiny, fragile newborn drifting helplessly beside its mother. It arrives already immense, measuring roughly 25 feet in length and weighing around 3 tons. A newborn blue whale exceeds the size of many fully grown marine predators. A great white shark that has spent years hunting through coastal waters may still be shorter than a calf, experiencing its very first day of life. Even so, size alone is not enough. The calf enters a world where growing quickly is not merely beneficial, it is essential. Every moment of early life is shaped by a biological urgency that has been refined across millions of years. The faster the calf grows, the sooner it leaves behind the narrow window during which it remains vulnerable. The ocean contains few creatures capable of threatening a young blue whale, but those few are significant enough to influence the species' entire reproductive strategy. Growth becomes protection. To achieve that growth, the mother provides one of the richest food sources found anywhere in nature. Blue whale milk contains an extraordinary concentration of fat, commonly ranging between roughly 35 and 50%. For comparison, human milk contains only a small fraction of that amount. The difference reflects entirely different biological challenges. A human infant must support the development of a relatively small terrestrial body. A blue whale calf must rapidly construct an animal destined to become the largest creature ever known. The milk resembles liquid fuel more than anything humans commonly encounter. Day after day, the calf consumes astonishing quantities. Estimates suggest that a young blue whale may drink roughly 100 to 150 gallons each day. The mother converts her own stored energy into nourishment, transferring enormous resources directly into the growing body swimming beside her. The results are visible almost immediately. The calf gains approximately 200 pounds every day. Broken down further, that represents roughly 8 pounds every hour. Hour after hour, day after day, while traveling through the ocean, the young whale continues adding mass. Growth never truly pauses. During the earliest months of life, the calf exists within one of the fastest sustained growth periods known among animals. The transformation is so dramatic that an individual can appear almost like a different creature within a relatively short span of time. By the time weaning approaches, usually somewhere between 6 and 8 months after birth, the calf may have doubled or even tripled its original length. The process begins long before birth itself. Gestation lasts approximately 10 to 12 months, meaning the mother invests nearly 2 years into each reproductive cycle when pregnancy and nursing are considered together. This investment explains much about blue whale life history. Unlike smaller animals capable of producing numerous offspring, female blue whales typically give birth to a single calf at a time. Reproduction proceeds slowly. Sexual maturity often arrives around 10 years of age, and births may be separated by intervals of several years. Every calf, therefore, carries enormous significance. The species cannot compensate for losses through sheer numbers. Success depends on ensuring that each newborn survives, grows, and eventually joins the adult population. Rapid growth is one of the most effective ways to achieve that goal. The strategy works because predators face a narrowing opportunity. An orcapod, capable of threatening a very young calf, encounters a much more difficult challenge only months later. As the calf grows, the balance shifts steadily in its favor. Each passing day adds size, strength, and resilience. The period of greatest vulnerability closes surprisingly fast. What appears at first to be an astonishing biological feat is also an elegant solution to a practical problem. The calf does not survive despite growing so quickly. It survives because it grows so quickly. And so, beside its mother, the young whale follows ancient migration routes while its body expands almost beyond belief, transforming from an already enormous newborn into a giant in training, carrying within it the future of a species whose entire existence depends on the success of each precious beginning. Some roads are made of stone. Others are traced across deserts, forests, or mountain passes. The road followed by a blue whale exists in no map visible to the eye. It stretches through open ocean, crossing entire regions of the planet without a single marker rising above the surface. And yet the whales find it. Year after year, generation after generation, they travel along routes that rank among the longest migrations performed by any animal on Earth. A single journey may span roughly 5,000 miles in one direction, linking distant feeding grounds with equally distant calving waters. The scale is so vast that continents become reference points rather than destinations. In the North Pacific, blue whales travel between rich northern feeding areas and warmer waters near Mexico and Central America. Antarctic populations undertake similarly immense movements, departing the productive Southern Ocean and heading toward subtropical regions farther north. These journeys unfold across months, connecting environments that could scarcely be more different. The reason lies in a biological compromise that has shaped the species for millions of years. The places best suited for feeding are often poor places for raising young. Polar waters contain the dense concentrations of krill that fuel blue whale life. Seasonal productivity transforms these cold regions into enormous reservoirs of food. During feeding months, whales gather the energy required to sustain themselves through much of the year. Yet those same waters present challenges for newborn calves. Temperatures are low. Conditions can be harsh. Predators capable of targeting young whales are more common. A calf entering the world in such an environment would face unnecessary risks during the most vulnerable period of its life. Warm, tropical, and subtropical waters offer a different set of advantages. Food is scarce compared to the polar seas, but safety is greater. The calmer environment provides a more suitable place for birth and early development. The result is a geographical divide that the whales must bridge every year. They travel because no single place provides everything they need. The cost of this solution is immense. During migration and much of the calving season, blue whales may eat very little or not at all. The energy gathered during feeding months must sustain them across thousands of miles of travel. They survive by drawing upon reserves stored within their blubber, carrying the memory of past abundance inside their own bodies. In a sense, each whale becomes a traveling storehouse of polar productivity, transporting energy accumulated in one part of the world to another entirely. What makes these journeys even more remarkable is their consistency. Research has shown that many blue whales return to the same feeding grounds repeatedly. Rather than wandering at random across the ocean, they navigate toward familiar destinations with extraordinary reliability. The routes appear to depend heavily upon memory. A whale learns where food can be found and returns again and again, often over the course of decades. Some of this knowledge may pass between generations. A calf traveling beside its mother experiences the migration firsthand. It encounters feeding grounds, movement corridors, and seasonal destinations long before it becomes independent. In this way, The route itself becomes part of the inheritance passed from one whale to the next. The ocean changes constantly, yet the pathway endures. There is also evidence suggesting another influence upon these migrations. Some researchers, including Robert Pittman, have proposed that predation risk may help shape the routes followed by large whales. Areas known to host concentrations of orcas could influence where whales travel, particularly when calves are involved. The idea remains difficult to prove conclusively, yet it offers an intriguing possibility. If true, then one of the longest migrations on Earth is not guided solely by food and reproduction. It is also shaped by avoidance. The implication carries a certain elegance. The largest animal ever to exist does not move across the ocean without constraints. Even a giant must navigate a world filled with competing pressures. Food lies in one direction, safety lies in another, and so the whale follows the longest road it knows, crossing immense distances between the two, carrying ancient memories through waters that have guided generations before it. Beneath the blue skin, beneath the muscles that drive migrations across oceans, lies a layer of tissue so important that much of the whale's existence depends upon it. At first glance, it might seem simple. Fat is often treated as storage, a reserve tucked away for future use. In a blue whale, however, blubber is something far more sophisticated. It functions as insulation, energy bank, structural support, and biological engineering all at once. Remove it, and much of what makes a blue whale possible begins to unravel. In some places, this layer can exceed a foot in thickness. That thickness matters because the whale lives in a world of extremes. Over the course of a year, an individual may travel between near-freezing polar waters and warm tropical seas. Temperatures that would challenge many animals are crossed routinely during migration. Throughout these changes, the whale must maintain a stable internal environment. Blubber makes that stability possible. Rather than allowing precious body heat to escape into the surrounding water, the tissue acts as an insulating barrier. Water removes heat far more efficiently than air, making thermal regulation a constant challenge for marine mammals. The whale's blubber slows that transfer, helping preserve the warmth generated within its enormous body. The result is a creature capable of moving between radically different environments without losing the conditions required for life. Yet insulation represents only one part of the story. During the feeding season, blue whales enter some of the most productive waters on Earth. There they consume immense quantities of krill, gathering energy on a scale difficult to comprehend. Much of that energy does not disappear immediately. Instead, it is converted into reserves and stored within the blubber itself. In effect, the whale carries future meals beneath its skin. Months later, those reserves become essential. During migration and the calving period, food may be scarce or absent altogether. The whale continues traveling, breathing, and maintaining its enormous body by gradually drawing upon energy accumulated earlier in the year. It survives by consuming the resources it previously stored. This creates a remarkable cycle. The abundance of one season fuels the scarcity of another. Polar productivity becomes tropical survival. The whale moves between these worlds, carrying a biological savings account built from countless millions of tiny crustaceans. The blubber also serves a less obvious purpose. An animal of such immense size faces unique physical challenges. Gravity still acts upon every part of its body. Water currents still exert force. Movement through the ocean requires maintaining a streamlined form capable of reducing drag and distributing stress efficiently. Blubber contributes to that architecture. It helps shape the body, supports hydrodynamic contours, and provides buoyancy. Without it, the whale's enormous frame would place even greater demands upon muscles and skeleton. The tissue functions partly as structural infrastructure, helping manage the physical realities of gigantism. Along the underside of the whale, this tissue becomes even more specialized. The ventral groove blubber running from the lower jaw toward the abdomen differs significantly from the blubber covering other regions. During feeding, these grooves expand dramatically as the whale engulfs massive volumes of water. The tissue stretches and flexes in ways ordinary fat could never achieve. It behaves less like stored energy and more like an engineered material. Researchers often compare it to an accordion because of its ability to expand and contract repeatedly while maintaining strength and flexibility. Without this specialized adaptation, the feeding strategy that supports the largest animal on Earth would be impossible. Ironically, the same tissue that sustained the whale also helped place it in danger. During the era of industrial whaling, blubber possessed immense economic value. Rendered into oil, it became a resource sought by nations and industries across the world. A single blue whale could yield more than 100 barrels of oil, transforming its body into a floating storehouse of profit. That value altered the relationship between humans and whales in profound ways. To the whale itself, blubber is life preserved beneath the skin, warmth against the cold, energy against hunger, and support against the demands of immense size. To those who hunted whales, it became something else entirely, a resource so valuable that entire fleets crossed oceans in pursuit of it, far below the reach of sunlight, where pressure gathers silently through the water column and the surface becomes a distant memory. A blue whale carries something remarkably fragile with it. Not strength, not size, breath. Every deep descent begins with a brief interval beneath the open sky. The whale rises, breaks the surface, and draws air through its blowholes with extraordinary efficiency. Unlike humans, who exchange only a modest fraction of the air in their lungs with each breath, a blue whale can replace most of it in a single cycle. Within moments, vast quantities of oxygen move into the bloodstream, preparing the body for a journey into darkness. The process appears effortless from above. A column of mist rises, the back arches gently, and the animal slips beneath the waves. Yet beneath that calm movement, an intricate physiological transformation is already beginning. Before descending, the whale often takes several breaths in succession, replenishing reserves that will sustain it far below. Oxygen is carried through the blood, but much of it is also stored directly within the muscles themselves. These tissues contain exceptionally high concentrations of myoglobin, a protein specialized for holding oxygen until it is needed. This abundance of myoglobin gives whale muscle its distinctive appearance, a deep shade so dark it can appear almost black. Hidden within that color is time itself, stored in chemical form, waiting to be spent slowly during the dive. As the whale sinks, conserving oxygen becomes more important than gathering it. The body responds with remarkable precision. Heart rate begins to fall. The powerful rhythm that supports life near the surface slows dramatically. Earlier glimpses into the whale's biology revealed just how extreme this reduction can become. During the deepest phases of a dive, the heart may beat only a few times each minute. Long pauses separate contractions. The intervals can seem almost impossible for a living creature of such size. Yet, the whale remains fully functional. This apparent contradiction is resolved through careful management of resources. Blood flow is redirected away from tissues that can temporarily tolerate reduced oxygen delivery. Muscles, skin, and other peripheral regions receive less. The brain and heart remain the priority, Oxygen is preserved for the organs whose uninterrupted function is essential. Some tissues adapt by shifting toward anaerobic metabolism, producing energy without immediate access to oxygen. It is a temporary compromise, one that allows the whale to extend its time below while protecting the systems most critical for survival. The circulation itself possesses a remarkable adaptation. Emerging from the heart is the great aortic arch, a vessel whose elastic walls perform a task unlike anything found in ordinary engineering. Each heartbeat stretches the vessel slightly, storing energy within its tissues. Between contractions, that energy is released gradually, helping maintain blood flow even during the long pauses when the heart is momentarily still. The effect resembles a living reservoir. A single heartbeat continues working long after the contraction itself has ended, smoothing circulation through the body while conserving precious energy. Deep beneath the surface, where heartbeats become infrequent and deliberate, this mechanism helps ensure that oxygen continues reaching the organs that depend upon it. As the descent continues, pressure increases relentlessly. Water presses inward from every direction. Cavities containing air become vulnerable to compression. For many animals, and certainly for human divers, this environment introduces significant risks. Dissolved gases can create dangerous physiological consequences during ascent, requiring careful management and technological assistance. The blue whale follows a different path. At sufficient depth, its lungs collapse naturally under the surrounding pressure. Rather than creating a problem, this collapse becomes a solution. With the lungs compressed, the exchange of nitrogen between air and blood is dramatically reduced. The process that leads to decompression sickness is largely prevented before it can begin. What appears destructive becomes protective. The whale's body yields to pressure in exactly the way it must. And so the descent continues, powered by oxygen gathered minutes earlier beneath an open sky. Heartbeats slow, muscles draw from hidden reserves, blood follows carefully guarded routes, and the immense animal moves through the abyss carrying within it a self-contained atmosphere, a temporary world of stored breath sustained by millions of years of refinement. A blue whale carries a brain that seems surprisingly modest when measured against the rest of its body. Within an animal that can stretch longer than many buildings and outweigh entire groups of terrestrial mammals combined, the brain occupies only a small fraction of the whole. It weighs roughly 5 kilograms. By comparison, the brain of a sperm whale, the largest known in the animal kingdom, exceeds 6 kilograms. Judged purely by proportion, the blue whale does not stand out among cetaceans as an exceptional thinker. For much of scientific history, this imbalance encouraged a simple assumption. A creature of such immense size, possessing a relatively low brain-to-body mass ratio, was often imagined as a specialist rather than a strategist. Its life seemed straightforward. Swim vast distances, locate krill, reproduce, migrate, repeat. Yet the ocean has a way of revealing complexity gradually. The farther researchers followed the movements of blue whales, the harder it became to reconcile those assumptions with reality. Across years, and sometimes decades, individuals returned to remarkably consistent feeding grounds. They crossed thousands of miles of open water without roads, landmarks, or visible boundaries. Calves accompanied their mothers along these routes, then later repeated similar journeys as independent adults. Somewhere within those migrations, information was being stored. Not for days or weeks, but for years. The routes themselves seem woven into memory, passed quietly from one generation to the next. A young whale leaving productive northern waters with its mother is not simply traveling. It is inheriting geography. It is learning where food appears, where conditions remain favorable, and how distant regions connect across an ocean that often looks identical in every direction. Such knowledge accumulates slowly, carried through time rather than instinct alone. The challenge becomes even more remarkable beneath the surface. Earlier passages through this story have followed blue whales into depths where sunlight vanishes and prey gathers far below the visible world. There, the whale must locate concentrations of krill hidden within darkness. The task resembles searching for a moving island concealed beneath hundreds of meters of water. Success depends upon interpreting subtle information, preserving memories of productive regions, and responding to conditions that shift from season to season. The whale cannot rely upon vision alone. At such depths, sight contributes little. Its world is built differently. For humans, landscapes are largely visual. Mountains, rivers, coastlines, and horizons define orientation. For a blue whale, sound assumes much of that role. The ocean carries acoustic information across extraordinary distances. Vibrations travel through water far faster than they travel through air, linking places that may lie beyond any possible line of sight. In this environment, sound becomes something larger than communication. It becomes geography. Low-frequency calls move outward through the sea, crossing immense stretches of water. Echoes, ambient noise, distant biological activity, and the calls of other whales all contribute pieces to an acoustic landscape that is invisible yet richly detailed. The blue whale lives immersed within this shifting field of information. Its brain may therefore be organized around different priorities than those found in highly social dolphins or orcas. Those animals navigate intricate social relationships, cooperative hunting strategies, and rapidly changing group dynamics. Such demands favor expanded processing devoted to social cognition. Blue whales lead very different lives. Their challenges revolve around long-distance navigation, temporal memory, environmental interpretation, and acoustic awareness spread across enormous scales. Intelligence, in this sense, becomes difficult to measure with simple comparisons of size. A smaller brain does not necessarily indicate a smaller world. For the blue whale, the essential task is not managing crowded societies or solving immediate social puzzles. It is maintaining a relationship with an ocean that changes continuously across thousands of miles and many years. It is remembering where life gathers in a moving sea. It is finding distant feeding grounds, tracing inherited pathways through featureless water, and navigating an acoustic universe whose landmarks are made not of stone or land, but of sound carried through the depths. Within that quiet architecture of memory and perception, the giant moves onward, guided by a mind shaped not for complexity of numbers, but for complexity of distance. Long before steel crossed the oceans, danger approached a blue whale in familiar forms. It came from beneath, from the side, from the shifting ecology of the sea itself. Predators announced their presence through movement, pressure, sound, and scent. Currents carried information. Evolution had millions of years to refine the senses required to interpret it. Then something entirely new entered the water. Not a predator shaped by natural selection, but an extension of an industrial civilization. The modern ocean is crossed by invisible roads. Container ships, tankers, cargo vessels, and freighters travel along fixed routes that connect continents. From above, these pathways exist only on maps and navigation charts. Beneath the surface, however, many of them intersect regions that blue whales have used for feeding and migration long before human trade linked distant ports. The overlap is often unavoidable. Blue whales spend much of their lives near the upper layers of the ocean. Dense concentrations of prey frequently gather there, particularly during productive feeding periods. At other times, whales rest, travel, or surface to breathe in waters that now carry a steady flow of maritime traffic. The result is a meeting between two worlds that evolved according to entirely different rules. A blue whale may stretch across an extraordinary length of ocean, yet size alone offers little protection against a vessel weighing tens of thousands of tons and moving at sustained speed. A large container ship traveling through open water can cross the distance between detection and impact with alarming speed. By the time a whale becomes aware of the vessel, there may be little opportunity to avoid it. Part of the difficulty lies in sound itself. The sensory systems of blue whales developed in an ocean without engines. For millions of years, underwater acoustics were dominated by waves, storms, geological activity, and the voices of living creatures. Mechanical propulsion arrived only recently on an evolutionary timescale. The constant low-frequency noise generated by ships can mask important environmental information, blending into the acoustic background and obscuring the approach of danger. The whale may hear sound. It may simply not recognize the threat embedded within it. When collisions occur, the consequences are often severe. The momentum carried by a large vessel is immense. An impact can fracture vertebrae, crush internal organs, or inflict devastating blunt force trauma. Propellers may carve deep wounds through tissue and bone. Some whales die immediately. Others continue swimming for a time before injuries prove fatal. Many cases are never fully observed. The ocean is vast, and evidence often disappears beneath the surface. Researchers studying blue whale mortality now regard ship strikes as one of the most significant threats facing several populations around the world. As global commerce has expanded, maritime traffic has increased dramatically. Routes that once carried occasional vessels now support constant movement. Feeding grounds and migratory corridors that remained unchanged for generations increasingly overlap with these busy passages. The danger grows not because whales have changed, but because the environment surrounding them has. Efforts to reduce collisions have shown that solutions are possible. In some regions, shipping lanes have been adjusted to reduce overlap with areas frequently used by whales. Certain coastal zones impose speed restrictions during periods when whales are known to be present. Acoustic monitoring systems listen for calls and provide information about whale activity in real time. These measures can be effective when consistently applied. Yet, implementation varies widely from place to place. Some protections remain voluntary. Enforcement can be limited. Economic priorities often compete with conservation goals, creating a landscape where success depends upon cooperation among governments, shipping industries, scientists, and regulators. What makes this threat particularly striking is its novelty. For roughly 50 million years, the ancestors of blue whales adapted to changing oceans, shifting climates, and evolving predators. Throughout that immense span of time, nothing in the sea routinely approached from above with enough speed and force to seriously threaten a healthy adult. Then, within little more than a century, that changed. The largest animal ever to live on Earth still moves through ancient migration routes and familiar feeding grounds. Yet now, crossing the same water, are machines whose presence arrived far too quickly for evolution to anticipate, turning the open surface of the ocean into one of the most dangerous places in a giant's world. There was a time when a blue whale's voice could travel through an ocean that was almost entirely natural. Storms rolled across the surface, Waves broke against distant shores. Ice shifted in polar seas. Earth itself occasionally rumbled beneath the seabed. These sounds formed the background of an acoustic world shaped over millions of years, a world in which whale calls evolved and spread across extraordinary distances. Today, that background is changing. The transformation is not immediately visible. The sea may appear calm from above, sunlight flashing across its surface as it always has. Yet, beneath that familiar image lies a growing layer of sound, generated not by weather or geology, but by industry. Cargo vessels cross shipping corridors day and night. Military sonar systems sweep through sections of ocean. Seismic surveys send powerful pulses into the seafloor in search of oil and gas deposits. Construction projects echo through coastal waters. Together, these activities contribute to an underwater soundscape far louder than the one blue whales inherited. Much of that noise occupies exactly the range where their voices live. The deepest notes produced by blue whales exist at remarkably low frequencies, frequencies capable of traveling vast distances through seawater. Unfortunately, many human activities generate energy within those same bands. Instead of moving through a quiet medium, whale calls increasingly compete with a chorus of mechanical sound. The consequence is subtle but profound. The whale still sings. The call still leaves its body and begins its journey outward. Yet somewhere along the path, the signal becomes tangled within a larger cloud of noise. Another whale may be listening, but the message arrives weakened, distorted, or not at all. Scientists describe this phenomenon as acoustic masking. The sound itself exists. The information it carries becomes harder to detect. In practical terms, the ocean grows smaller. A call that might once have traveled hundreds of miles with relative clarity now encounters obstacles made not of land or water, but of competing sound. Researchers studying heavily trafficked regions have suggested that the effective communication range available to blue whales may have been reduced dramatically compared with conditions that existed before large-scale industrial activity transformed the seas. The reduction is not measured merely in distance. It alters relationships. Blue whales spend much of their lives separated by immense stretches of water. Earlier passages through this story followed individuals moving alone across migration routes thousands of miles long. Sound bridges those separations. It allows distant animals to announce their presence, locate potential mates, and maintain connections across an environment where direct encounters are rare. When those signals become harder to hear, the consequences ripple outward through the biology of the species itself. Finding another whale becomes more difficult. Maintaining contact across large areas becomes less reliable. A world already defined by distance grows even larger. Some researchers have wondered whether the changing nature of blue whale songs may partly reflect this new acoustic reality. The gradual lowering of song frequencies observed across populations has inspired many explanations, and noise pollution remains among the possibilities under consideration. Perhaps deeper tones move through modern oceans more effectively. Perhaps subtle adjustments provide advantages within increasingly crowded soundscapes. For now, the evidence remains incomplete. The mystery endures. At the same time, another pattern has emerged. Long-term recordings analyzed by researchers have suggested that blue whale songs are not only becoming deeper, but also quieter. Across recent decades, average song intensity appears to have declined significantly. The reason remains uncertain. One possibility is almost paradoxical. In a world saturated with noise, producing ever louder calls may no longer offer the benefits it once did. The relationship between signal and distance changes when the environment itself becomes filled with competing sound. Energy spent on volume may yield diminishing returns. Whatever the explanation, the result is striking. The loudest animal on Earth continues to sing across the ocean. Its voice still travels through darkness, across migration corridors, beneath storms and currents. Yet each year, that voice moves through a medium increasingly crowded by the sounds of another species. The whale has not fallen silent. The ocean around it has simply become harder to hear through. For millions upon millions of years, the blue whale's greatest defense was not speed, intelligence, or aggression. It was scale. The animal had become so immense that very little in the natural world could threaten it. Entire geological ages passed while its ancestors refined lives built around migration, feeding, and survival in the open ocean. Storms came and went. Ice advanced and retreated. Continents shifted imperceptibly across the planet. Through it all, the largest creature Earth had ever produced remained beyond the reach of most dangers. Then a new force arrived. It did not emerge from the sea. It arrived from ports, shipyards, and industrial nations. At the beginning of the 20th century, a technological threshold was crossed. Steam-powered vessels became fast enough to pursue the great rorqual whales across open water. At the same time, explosive harpoons transformed hunting from a difficult pursuit into an industrial process. Together, these inventions altered a relationship that had existed for centuries. Before their arrival, blue whales were effectively protected by their own biology. Sailing ships struggled to keep pace with them. Traditional harpoons lacked the power required to reliably kill such enormous animals. Their size acted as a shield. Almost overnight, that shield ceased to matter. The ocean that had once provided refuge became a workplace. Across the Southern Ocean, where immense concentrations of Antarctic blue whales gathered to feed, fleets expanded their operations. Ships pursued whales across vast distances. Factory vessels processed carcasses directly at sea, eliminating the need to return to shore between hunts. The scale of extraction increased dramatically. Every whale represented profit. Blubber could be rendered into oil. Meat could be processed. Bones could be converted into useful products. An animal that had taken millions of years to evolve became, in the calculations of industry, a collection of valuable resources. Competition intensified the pressure. Nations raced to harvest whales before competitors reached the same waters. The economic incentives were powerful enough that restraint rarely entered the equation. As long as whales remained available, fleets continued searching for them. Year after year, the numbers fell. Between the early years of the 20th century and the late 1960s, approximately 350,000 blue whales were killed. The magnitude of that figure is difficult to fully comprehend because it unfolded gradually, distributed across decades and oceans, yet the consequences accumulated relentlessly. Before large-scale industrial whaling began, global blue whale populations are believed to have numbered roughly between 340,000 and 350,000 individuals. By the middle of the 1960s, only a tiny fraction remained. Some estimates suggest the worldwide population fell to as few as 5,000 animals, a reduction approaching total collapse. The Antarctic blue whale suffered even more severely. Once numbering approximately 239,000 individuals, the population crashed until only a few hundred remained, not a few 100,000. Not a remnant spread across a healthy population. only a few hundred animals in total. A lineage that had crossed oceans for countless generations found itself pushed to the edge of disappearance within the span of a human lifetime. What makes the story particularly striking is its speed. The evolutionary journey from a small land mammal walking beside ancient waterways to the largest animal in Earth's history required tens of millions of years. The destruction of most of that population required only decades. In geological terms, the decline occurred almost instantaneously. Eventually, concern grew impossible to ignore. Scientists, conservationists, and international organizations documented the scale of the losses. Evidence accumulated. Population surveys revealed the severity of the decline. By the mid-1960s, commercial hunting of blue whales was formally prohibited by the International Whaling Commission. 2 decades later, a broader moratorium extended protections across commercial whaling more generally. The hunting slowed. The harpoons fell silent in many regions. But silence could not immediately restore what had been removed. Across vast stretches of ocean, migration routes remained. Feeding grounds remained. Ancient songs still moved through the water. Yet the giants that once filled those spaces had become ghosts of their former abundance, and the sea carried the memory of a century during which the largest animal ever to live was reduced, not by nature, but by industry. Long after the harpoons were supposed to have fallen silent, some blue whales still vanished into the machinery of industry. The change was invisible from the surface. International agreements had been signed. Protective measures had been announced. Across much of the world, there was growing belief that the worst years were ending. The Great Decline seemed, at least on paper, to have been confronted. The surviving whales, reduced to a shadow of their former abundance, appeared to have finally received the protection they desperately needed. Yet, beneath that appearance, another story was unfolding. Far from public scrutiny, Soviet whaling fleets continued operating in the cold expanses of the world's oceans. Ships sailed under a system built not only on hunting whales, but on concealing the true scale of what was taking place. Official reports presented one reality to international regulators. The water around the factory ships recorded another. The deception was systematic. Catch records submitted to the international community reported far fewer blue whales than had actually been taken. Numbers were altered. Data were hidden. The discrepancy was not a matter of occasional error or isolated misconduct. It was woven into the operation itself, allowing continued hunting while maintaining the appearance of compliance. For scientists outside the Soviet system, the consequences remained largely invisible. Researchers studying whale populations could observe the results without understanding their cause. Some populations recovered more slowly than expected. Certain regions remained strangely depleted despite legal protections. Models projected one outcome while the ocean delivered another. The missing piece remained locked away in archives, reports, and memories unavailable to the wider scientific world. Meanwhile, the whales continued their ancient journeys. They crossed feeding grounds that had grown quieter. They followed migration routes carried across generations. Mothers guided calves through waters once crowded with far more of their kind. Every surviving individual represented a lineage that had already endured extraordinary losses. Yet even after international protection had supposedly arrived, some of those survivors were still being removed. The full truth emerged only after the collapse of the Soviet Union. As political barriers dissolved, former Soviet whaling scientists began revealing what had happened. Historical records were examined. Internal documents surfaced. Researchers compared official reports with the actual catches that had been recorded within the fleets themselves. The scale of the deception gradually became clear. The true number of whales killed was substantially higher than international authorities had been led to believe. Entire datasets that had guided scientific understanding for decades were suddenly revealed to be incomplete. Population estimates had been built upon foundations that concealed a significant portion of the story. For marine biologists, the revelation reshaped the history of modern whaling. The population collapse was not merely severe. It had been deeper than many researchers realized. The period of recovery had not begun when people assumed it had. In some regions, protection existed more as an aspiration than a reality. The bottleneck through which blue whales had passed became even narrower. A bottleneck in biology is more than a reduction in numbers. It is a constriction of possibility. Fewer individuals mean fewer breeding opportunities, fewer migrating groups, fewer chances for populations to rebuild momentum. When numbers fall low enough, recovery becomes a slow negotiation with time itself. The hidden catches extended that struggle. Years that appeared on official timelines as years of protection were, for some whales, years of continued pursuit. The distinction mattered enormously. Blue whales reproduce slowly. Females invest immense energy into raising a single calf. Population growth unfolds across decades rather than seasons. Every additional loss carries consequences that echo far into the future. As the true records came to light, certain mysteries began to make sense. Recovery rates that once seemed puzzling now aligned more closely with reality. The ocean had not been behaving unpredictably. Scientists had simply been working without the full story. Today, the surviving blue whales carry no memory of those falsified reports, no awareness of hidden archives or political decisions. They move through the sea according to rhythms far older than any government. Yet the slow pace of their return still bears the imprint of those concealed years when protection existed in principle. While in distant waters, the hunt continued unseen, and the world's largest animal remained vulnerable to dangers hidden behind silence itself. Recovery does not arrive as a single moment. It arrives unevenly, carried on different currents in different oceans, visible in some places and frustratingly absent in others. Across the vast range once occupied by blue whales, the story of survival has fragmented into many smaller stories. Some populations have begun rebuilding themselves from the narrow margins left by the 20th century. Others remain suspended near the edge, growing so slowly that change becomes difficult to perceive within a human lifetime. Along the eastern North Pacific, there are signs of what protection can achieve when given enough time. The whales that feed along the coast of California and migrate toward the warmer waters off Mexico are often cited as one of conservation's most encouraging successes. Decades after commercial hunting ceased, their numbers have climbed steadily. Researchers studying this population believe it may have returned close to the abundance that existed before industrial whaling transformed the ocean. The return has not been dramatic. It has unfolded across generations. A calf survived, then another. Females matured and produced calves of their own. Ancient migration routes remained intact. Feeding grounds continued to support the enormous demand imposed by bodies built on a scale unlike anything else alive. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, numbers increased. In these waters, the ocean offers a glimpse of what recovery can look like when the conditions remain favorable. Far to the south, however, the picture changes. The Antarctic blue whale once dominated the Southern Ocean. Before industrial hunting began, Scientists estimate that roughly 239,000 individuals moved through those nutrient-rich waters. Their feeding grounds stretched across an ecosystem that seemed inexhaustible. Then came the century of extraction. When the hunting finally stopped, the population had collapsed to a level almost beyond comprehension. The descendants of those survivors still inhabit the Southern Ocean today, but their numbers remain astonishingly low. Recent conservative estimates place the population at roughly 2,280 individuals. After more than half a century of formal protection, only a tiny fraction of the original population has returned. The explanation lies partly within the whale itself. Everything about blue whale life operates at a slow pace. Females reach reproductive maturity only after many years. A mother typically gives birth to a single calf, then invests immense energy in its growth and survival. Another calf may not arrive for several years afterward. Individuals can live for many decades, sometimes approaching a century. This strategy served the species well for millions of years because adult blue whales rarely died from predation. Natural mortality remained low, allowing populations to persist even with modest birth rates. Industrial whaling shattered that balance. A species adapted for stability suddenly faced losses on a scale its biology had never been required to withstand. Once numbers fell, rebuilding became a process measured not in years, but in generations. Even now, another challenge is beginning to emerge from the same waters that sustain them. The Antarctic ecosystem depends upon cold conditions. Sea ice influences the productivity of the ocean. Nutrients circulate through complex seasonal cycles. At the center of this system stand the immense swarms of krill upon which blue whales depend. As global temperatures rise, those foundations are shifting. In some regions, Antarctic sea ice has declined. Ocean temperatures have changed. Researchers continue studying how these changes affect krill populations, but many projections suggest that future warming could reduce the abundance of the very prey that supports the largest animals on Earth. For a creature whose entire existence rests upon dense concentrations of small crustaceans, even modest ecological changes can ripple outward through every aspect of life. Scientific models published in recent years have explored these possibilities. Some suggest that under continued warming scenarios, certain blue whale populations, including populations in the Pacific, could face severe declines despite recovering from the devastation of whaling. It is a striking contrast. The harpoon was visible. It arrived aboard ships and left scars that could be counted. Climate change moves differently. It alters temperatures, currents, ice cover, and food webs. Its influence spreads through systems rather than through direct pursuit. And so, the blue whale's return remains unfinished, balanced between recovery and uncertainty, carried forward by animals whose lives unfold across decades, continuing their ancient migrations through an ocean that is still changing around them. Beneath the drifting skin of Antarctic sea ice, an unseen nursery has existed for countless generations. In the dim water beneath the frozen surface, films of algae cling to the underside of the ice. Here, among crystals and shadows, larval krill find one of the most important resources in their early lives. The ice is not merely a platform floating on the ocean, it is habitat, shelter, and sustenance, woven directly into the rhythm of survival for one of the smallest creatures supporting one of the largest. When winter ice spreads across the Southern Ocean, it creates conditions that young krill have evolved alongside for immense spans of time. When that ice retreats, the relationship shifts. When it shrinks year after year, the consequences begin to ripple outward through the entire ecosystem. The blue whale never sees most of this. Far away from the nursery grounds, the whale moves through open water, guided by instincts and migrations refined across millions of years. Yet every mouthful it consumes depends upon processes unfolding far beyond its awareness. Its survival is tied to creatures small enough to disappear between human fingertips, and those creatures are tied to the fate of the ice. Over recent decades, scientists studying the Southern Ocean have documented significant changes in sea ice extent and ocean temperature. In many regions, the frozen habitat that once covered vast areas has become less predictable. Some seasons bring reduced ice coverage, others bring unusual patterns that differ from those that shaped the ecosystem for generations. Krill populations appear to be responding. The exact magnitude of change remains an active area of research, and different regions tell different stories, but the overall concern has become increasingly difficult to ignore. In several important feeding areas, evidence suggests that krill abundance has declined alongside changing environmental conditions. For animals that depend upon krill, even modest reductions can carry enormous consequences. A blue whale does not hunt a variety of prey. It cannot simply turn toward another food source when conditions become unfavorable. Throughout its long evolutionary journey, natural selection refined its body around a single strategy. Its baleen plates, expandable throat pleats, migration routes, feeding behavior, and extraordinary size all became linked to dense concentrations of krill. That specialization brought tremendous success. When krill gather in vast swarms, few feeding strategies on Earth are more efficient. The whale can convert immense patches of tiny animals into the energy required to sustain a body larger than any other ever known. Yet specialization carries a price. A humpback whale may switch between krill and small schooling fish. Many marine predators can alter their diets when conditions change. The blue whale possesses far less flexibility. Its anatomy is built around prey of a particular scale, concentrated at particular densities in particular regions of the ocean. The system functions beautifully when those conditions persist. It becomes fragile when they do not. Adding another layer of pressure is the growing commercial demand for krill itself. Across parts of the Southern Ocean, industrial fisheries harvest krill for aquaculture feed, nutritional supplements, and various commercial products. Compared with the historical scale of whaling, the extraction may appear small, but it targets a resource already facing environmental stress. Each harvest removes part of the foundation, supporting a much larger web of life. Whales, seals, penguins, seabirds, fish, and countless other organisms all intersect at this same resource. The krill swarm becomes a crossroads where many ecological paths meet. Climate models examining future warming scenarios suggest that some key feeding regions could experience substantial reductions in krill abundance by the middle of this century if current trends continue. Such projections remain uncertain, as all forecasts do, but they point toward a future in which the carrying capacity of parts of the Southern Ocean may decline. The irony settles quietly across the story. Gigantism protected the blue whale from nearly every predator. Its immense size transformed it into an animal beyond the reach of most threats. Yet, that same evolutionary path narrowed its dependence until survival became anchored to a single food source. The largest animal ever to live ultimately rests upon the fate of a creature scarcely longer than a finger, drifting beneath Antarctic ice, sustaining a chain of life so vast that an entire giant depends upon its continued abundance. Far below the migrations, below the hunting grounds, below the reach of sunlight and weather, another chapter of the blue whale's story quietly unfolds. It begins when motion finally ceases. After decades crossing oceans, after journeys measured in thousands of miles and seasons measured in memory, a blue whale eventually dies. The body remains afloat for a time, carried by currents and waves. Then, as gases escape and tissues begin to change, gravity gradually takes hold. The descent is slow. The enormous body sinks through layers of water that few living creatures ever visit. It passes through fading blue light, then through darkness. Downward it travels, kilometer after kilometer, through a world where the surface becomes unimaginably distant. Eventually, the whale reaches the deep sea floor. When the carcass comes to rest at depths greater than 1,000 meters, within the bathyal or abyssal realms, it becomes something rare and extraordinary. Scientists call this event a whale fall. In the deep ocean, food is precious. Tiny particles drift down from above like a sparse snowfall, sustaining life in an environment where energy arrives slowly and unpredictably. Against that backdrop, the arrival of a blue whale is almost impossible in scale. Hundreds of tons of flesh, blubber, connective tissue, and bone suddenly appear in a place where even a small meal can be valuable. The carcass becomes a landscape. Its presence sends chemical signals spreading into the darkness. Organisms capable of detecting these traces begin moving toward the source. Before long, the first visitors arrive. Sleeper sharks circle through the black water. Hagfish slip into openings in the flesh. Isopods, crustaceans, rat tails, and other scavengers gather across the body. Soft tissues that once powered migrations across entire oceans now become nourishment for creatures that spend their lives in darkness. This first phase is known as the mobile scavenger stage. For months, and sometimes for as long as a couple of years, these wandering consumers strip away much of the whale's flesh. What appears from a human perspective as decay is, from the perspective of the deep ocean, a massive transfer of energy. Nutrients locked within the whale begin flowing outward into countless other lives. As the larger scavengers finish their work, another community emerges. The sediments surrounding the carcass become enriched by falling scraps and organic debris. Worms spread through the sea floor nearby. Sea snails appear. Shrimp and bristleworms colonize the area. Smaller organisms exploit opportunities created by the feast that came before them. Scientists call this the enrichment opportunist stage. The whale is no longer simply a body. It has become an ecosystem. Every remaining fragment supports another layer of life. Species arrive, feed, reproduce, and interact within a patch of ocean floor transformed by a single event. Yet the most remarkable chapter still lies ahead. Deep within the bones, vast reserves of lipids remain trapped. These fats represent stored energy accumulated over a lifetime of feeding and migration. Specialized bacteria begin colonizing this hidden resource, breaking down the compounds through chemical processes that release hydrogen sulfide. The result is the sulfophilic stage. Now the whale fall starts to resemble a deep-sea hydrothermal vent. Instead of relying on sunlight, entire communities become supported by chemistry. Bacteria form the foundation of the ecosystem, and other organisms depend upon them in turn. Energy continues flowing long after the last scraps of flesh have disappeared. This phase can endure for decades. In some cases, whale bones continue supporting life for half a century or more. What began as a single death becomes a long-lasting island of productivity in one of the most food-limited environments on Earth. Among the strangest residents are the creatures known as osedacs, sometimes called zombie worms. Discovered only in the early years of this century, they possess neither mouths nor stomachs. Instead, they bore directly into whale bones and rely upon symbiotic bacteria to help extract nutrients from the lipids hidden within. Delicate and flower-like in appearance, they thrive where almost nothing else can. And so, the blue whale's influence extends far beyond its life. Even in death, the giant continues feeding worlds it never knew existed, transforming a silent patch of abyssal seafloor into a living community that may endure for generations beneath the dark and distant ocean above. Far beyond the reach of ships, storms, and sunlight, traces of an older ocean still linger on the seafloor. They are not ruins in any human sense. No stone walls stand there. No monuments mark their locations. Yet scattered across the abyss are the echoes of an ecological network that once connected the surface world to the deepest parts of the planet. For millions of years, the deaths of great whales were not unusual events. Whales migrated along established routes across entire ocean basins. They lived long lives, reproduced, aged, and eventually died. Their bodies sank into darkness, carrying immense stores of energy downward. The process repeated endlessly across generations. Every migration corridor became linked to the deep sea below through a steady rain of enormous carcasses. Scientists estimate that before industrial whaling, large whale falls may have occurred with remarkable frequency along some migration routes. In certain regions, a carcass may have reached the seafloor every few miles, not every year and not in perfect distribution, but often enough that the deep ocean evolved around their presence. Whale falls were not isolated accidents. They were part of the architecture of the ecosystem. A scavenger drifting through abyssal darkness might encounter one whale fall, consume its resources, reproduce, and disperse offspring that eventually located another. Specialized organisms could persist because the next opportunity was never impossibly far away. The ocean floor contained stepping stones of energy linking distant communities across vast stretches of darkness. Entire evolutionary pathways emerged from that continuity. Bacteria adapted to exploit the chemistry of whale bones. Worms evolved ways of accessing nutrients locked deep within skeletal tissue. Scavengers incorporated whale falls into life cycles refined over geological time. Generation after generation unfolded beneath the assumption that whales would continue arriving. Then the surface world changed. Industrial whaling did more than remove animals from the ocean. It interrupted a process that had operated for millions of years. As blue whales and other great whales disappeared, so too did the future whale falls they would have produced. The reduction was immense. When populations of large whales collapsed across the 20th century, the delivery of carcasses to the abyss declined accordingly. In some regions, what had once been a relatively common ecological event became extraordinarily rare. The highways of organic matter connecting surface and seafloor began to break apart. What happened next remains one of the great unanswered questions of marine science. The deep ocean is the least observed environment on Earth. Most of its vast expanse has never been directly explored. Scientists possess only scattered observations, isolated surveys, and brief glimpses into ecosystems that exist beyond ordinary reach. Because of that limitation, no one can fully measure the consequences. If species depended heavily upon frequent whale falls, some may have declined. Some populations may have become fragmented. Others may have vanished entirely before they were ever discovered. Extinction leaves clear evidence in some environments, but in the abyss it can pass almost unnoticed. An organism unknown to science can disappear without leaving a name behind. The possibility hangs quietly over the history of industrial whaling. The slaughter altered ecosystems visible at the surface, but it may also have reshaped biological communities hidden thousands of meters below. The full scale of that transformation remains concealed within darkness that researchers are only beginning to explore. Now, as some whale populations slowly recover, another process is unfolding. More whales mean more future whale falls. Not immediately, and not on the scale that once existed, but gradually, the connection between surface and abyss is strengthening again. Each recovered population carries consequences, extending far beyond the animals themselves. A living blue whale gathers energy from swarms of krill, concentrating nutrients into a single immense body. Decades later, that same body may descend into darkness and release those resources back into an entirely different world. The exchange spans ecosystems, depths, and lifetimes. In this way, the blue whale occupies a role larger than its own existence. It is not merely a consumer moving through the ocean. It is also a future source of abundance, a vessel transporting energy from productive waters to places where food is otherwise scarce. Even after life ends, the gift continues. For decades, sometimes longer than many human lives, a single whale fall can nourish communities hidden beneath the deepest darkness, sustaining organisms that may never encounter another whale, yet remain connected to its passage long after the giant itself has vanished into the silence of the sea floor. The first sign is often not the whale itself, it is the space around it. Across much of the ocean, life gathers wherever conditions allow. Fish cluster around structure, seabirds circle feeding grounds, predators follow prey, and prey follows food. The sea is a landscape of movement and association, countless organisms woven together through proximity and necessity. Yet around a blue whale, there is often a different pattern, not emptiness in the absolute sense, but distance, separation, a widening circle in which other animals drift at the margins rather than the center. The whale moves through water already occupied by life, and still the ocean seems to part around it. The reason begins with a simple fact. Nothing else operates on the same scale. Across the entire history of life, no animal has ever grown larger. Not the great reptiles of ancient seas, not the dinosaurs that walked on land, not any creature alive today. The blue whale occupies a category containing only itself. Every aspect of its existence reflects that singularity. Its heart outweighs many terrestrial animals. Its blood moves through vessels wide enough for a human arm. Its migrations connect distant regions of the planet, tracing routes thousands of miles long across open water. When it descends into darkness, it reaches depths that would seem unreachable from the bright surface above. When it returns to breathe, its exhalation rises high into the air, visible long before the body beneath the surface reveals itself. The whale does not gather these records through competition. It is not engaged in a contest with the rest of the ocean. Its size emerged through a chain of evolutionary opportunities stretching back millions of years, shaped by abundant food, efficient feeding, and a world capable of supporting unprecedented mass. The result is an animal that appears less like an oversized version of another species and more like an ecosystem condensed into a single body. Even its contradictions seem impossible. A creature weighing hundreds of tons survives on prey small enough to rest on a fingertip. In a single day, it may consume tens of millions of individual krill, filtering them from seawater with extraordinary efficiency. Yet the passage leading from its mouth to its stomach remains surprisingly narrow. The largest animal ever known depends entirely on some of the smallest animals in the sea. Its voice follows the same pattern. The most powerful biological sound on Earth travels across enormous distances, moving through entire regions of ocean. Yet much of that sound exists below the range of human hearing. The loudest animal on the planet speaks largely in frequencies we cannot perceive without instruments. Its life is equally paradoxical. The whale can communicate across hundreds of miles, sending information into a world structured by sound rather than sight. Those calls may reach distant individuals, separated by expanses of ocean difficult to imagine. And still, despite that connection, the blue whale spends much of its existence alone, not isolated through exclusion, not separated by conflict, simply dispersed by scale. The resources required to sustain such a body are immense. The distances it travels are immense. The environment it inhabits is immense. Every dimension of its existence stretches outward until solitude becomes a natural consequence. For this reason, the blue whale occupies a place unlike that of apex predators. An orca dominates through coordination and strategy. A great white shark dominates through speed and weaponry. Their influence emerges through action. The blue whale exerts influence through presence. Its movement displaces water on a scale detectable by other animals. Its feeding reshapes concentrations of prey. Its migrations connect ecosystems separated by oceans. Even after death, its body nourishes deep-sea communities for decades. The whale changes the world around it simply by existing within it. And so the ocean often clears around the blue whale in the same way clouds drift around a mountain peak. Not because the mountain is hostile, not because it seeks control, but because its scale alters everything nearby. The blue whale stands apart from the rest of the ocean not through aggression, dominance, or fear. It stands apart because evolution carried it beyond every familiar measure into a realm occupied by a single living creature, moving quietly through water vast enough to contain it. There is a strange symmetry at the end of this story. Long before oceans carried giants, before songs crossed entire basins of water, before migrations stitched together distant horizons, a small four-legged mammal stepped from the land toward the sea. It lived in a world unimaginably different from our own. Yet within its descendants lay a possibility that evolution would spend millions of years unfolding. Generation after generation, that lineage changed. Legs became flippers, nostrils drifted upward, bodies lengthened, streamlined, and adapted to a life suspended between gravity and buoyancy. Epochs passed, continents shifted, oceans opened and closed. Through all of it, the descendants of those early mammals continued their journey, becoming creatures increasingly specialized for a realm their ancestors had never known. Across roughly 50 million years, one branch of that lineage achieved something unparalleled. It became the blue whale, not merely a large animal, but the largest animal ever known to have existed. Larger than the greatest dinosaurs, larger than any predator, grazer, swimmer, or flyer that had come before. An organism operating at the absolute edge of what biology could sustain, balanced between immense power and immense fragility. For millions upon millions of years, that achievement held. The ocean offered challenges, certainly. Orcas occasionally tested calves. Food availability rose and fell with changing climates. Storms swept across migration routes. Entire ice ages came and went. Yet nothing truly threatened the species on a global scale. Its size protected it, its mobility protected it, the vastness of the ocean protected it. Then, almost suddenly, in evolutionary terms, a new force appeared. It did not emerge from the sea. It came from the land. The same land, abandoned by distant ancestors so long ago. Within a span so brief that it scarcely registers against geological time, human beings transformed the relationship between themselves and the largest creature on Earth. Steam-powered ships removed the limitations of wind and current. Explosive harpoons removed the limitations of strength and distance. Factory vessels removed the need to return to shore. The protections that had sheltered blue whales for millions of years ceased to matter. Size no longer helped. Speed no longer helped. The open ocean no longer helped. Between the beginning of industrial blue whale hunting and the eventual prohibition of commercial harvest, approximately 350,000 blue whales were killed. Entire populations collapsed. In Antarctic waters, where these giants once gathered in extraordinary numbers, abundance fell to a fraction of its former scale. The decline happened with astonishing speed. Evolution had spent millions of years creating the largest animal in Earth's history. Human industry nearly erased it within decades. Protection eventually arrived. Commercial hunting was banned. Some populations began a slow recovery. The ocean retained enough resilience to keep the species alive. Yet the story did not return to what it had been. The Antarctic population remains only a small remnant of its former size. Ocean temperatures continue to rise. Krill populations face mounting pressure from environmental change. Noise spreads through waters once defined by distance and silence. And still the whale persists. It continues to descend into darkness, carrying reserves of oxygen within blood and muscle. It continues to cross entire oceans along routes inherited across generations. It continues to search for dense clouds of krill in a world that is steadily changing around it. It continues to sing. Those songs have grown deeper over the decades, following a pattern scientists still cannot fully explain. Across thousands of recordings and countless hours of listening, the mystery remains unresolved. The largest voice on Earth continues to shift in ways no one yet understands. Perhaps that is fitting. Even after all that has been learned, the blue whale retains an element of distance. Not distance measured in miles or depth, but in perspective. It remains a creature larger than ordinary comparison, moving through scales of space, time, and biology that challenge intuition. And so, as this long journey reaches its quiet end, the central question changes shape. It was never truly about why nothing in the ocean goes near the blue whale. The ocean has already given its answer. The greater question concerns the one species that did approach, the one species capable of reaching across oceans, altering climates, filling the sea with noise, and bringing the largest animal on Earth to the edge of disappearance. The blue whale still follows the ancient paths taught by its mother. The remaining question is whether humanity will learn to leave room for the giant that once came from the same shore.